Good morning, Mike. Super excited about this one. This is going to be good. We're kind of tying up our KPIs together, aren't we?
We're going to take it home, dude. Part 3 of our KPI journey, calling this one Mind the Gap.
I love it. I love it. And surprisingly to me, I have not fallen asleep during any of these podcasts thinking that KPIs were going to absolutely bore me out of my shoes. This has been really, really intriguing and exciting to me, especially being a small business owner and kind of changing my perspective on KPIs and how important they are. And they're not just for the giant corporations out there. They're not just for the manufacturers or the warehouses or the billion-dollar companies out there. They have an integral and should have an integral part in each and every small business.
Yeah, and what I like is, you and I don't spend a lot of time preparing for these meetings.
What are
We
you
don't talk to
talking
each
about?
other.
That is not true. I sweat over this hours and hours each week. If you
All the
knew
time
the
is,
effort that went in to try to keep up with you, Mike. So I don't appreciate you rubbing that in.
I mean, post-production, that's a whole nother animal. But in terms of, we spend a good amount of time making sure we've got a good path that we're on, right? And we're trying to convey a message, a way to improve your business over time. But in terms of our interaction beforehand and sort of doing a rehearsal, we don't. And that was a cool thing when I started sharing with you the process behavior charts. When you start to show those to people and how powerful those are, they light up, and the KPIs go from something that's just stuck on the wall or something that it's admiring the problem to helping you understand, should I start trying to improve or not? And we'll get into that today. But it makes them come alive. It makes them radiate information instead of just having numbers on a wall and say, oh, hey, these are our 4 most important KPIs, and nobody has nobody understands why. Nobody understands what's really happening with those numbers. And so by just using that simple chart we talked about, it can radiate an enormous amount of information to you and help you understand, am I ready to start making improvements to my system or not?
Right, right. And what this is these are just fantastic tools that you as a small business owner can add and easily implement in your toolbox every day to help push your business a little bit further and really to gain clarity. And if you can gain clarity in that, you're reducing your own personal stress. You're willing to take more risks in certain areas, where not to. It just really fundamentally changes the whole picture on how you're operating. So that's why I love this. So let's dive right into it. This is part 3, the last part. You're not going to add any others on. Is that correct? Do I have your Scout's honor on this one?
You do not. You know that we always can make adjustments. So again, we take a step back. We talked about identifying KPIs that are critical to the business, both output KPIs and process metrics, potentially all tied to the true north, right? The primary aim for your business. Then we plotted the dots, which was, I remember when you first looked at that graph I showed you, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And it was reminiscent of probably a lot of KPIs that you've seen. And once we showed that, we said, hey, we can tell if the information that you're seeing, those KPIs, is the dot. Every new dot that shows up, should I worry or not about that dot? Now, if I look backwards, can I tell whether this is a process in control or not? And if it's in control, beautiful. If not, we said take those signals, those things that are falling outside of the upper and lower control limits. Let's find out what's happening to the system, what caused those unusual events to happen, remove those, and now we're ready to take a step back and say, okay, now let's start to talk about improvement. So we're consistently now delivering whatever that KPI is. We're consistently have a consistent output or outcome. And now we're ready to say, okay, let's start improving that particular process.
Right, right. So I love it because the first section was, hey, just practice measuring and just get used to measuring. And then the next part was, now know Now that we have all of this information that we're measuring, now part two is know what and what not to take action on. Don't freak out over everything. And then this third part is really going to be where the rubber meets the road. Okay, now that we know what we're measuring, that we're measuring the right things, now we know what we're going to be actually, thanks to the last episode, what we should be taking action on and what we should be ignoring. Now we're going to learn on really get an idea of, okay, here are the steps to take for change. So let's go with it. I love it.
Right. So yeah. So 4 steps here to plan. We're either planning a change or planning an improvement. So number 1 is, if we have a stable process now, which we do because we've removed those those signals from the system, do we still have a gap? Meaning, are we falling short of whatever our target is? Let's say it could be revenue per month. It could be gross margin. It could be customer sat, whatever those things are. Is there still a gap? Great. Then we don't have to create one. We'll just say our goal now is to modify our existing system to get us to that number, whatever that number is. The second way to do it is, let's say we're going strong and we are delivering on that target, but as part of our strategy for the next year, we said, let's increase customer satisfaction, right? We want to increase that number, or let's increase inventory turns. In this case, we're actually creating a gap. So a gap doesn't exist, but we're saying, hey, we want to improve something. So let's set a target for improvement. So we either have a gap that exists, or we're going to create a gap. And either one of those are going to drive the improvement we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And again, this keeps our nose to the grindstone. It keeps us humble. It keeps us action oriented with it, which is what we want. And as a small business owner, one of the biggest aspects that I feel is lacking in a small business owner's life is accountability. And that is the one thing, not because they don't want to be accountable, but usually they either don't have time, they don't have the infrastructure set up, or they don't have the money. And therefore they tend to we all get so that we lose our true north, so to speak. And these KPIs are a wonderful way of keeping us accountable when we don't necessarily have a board of directors to report to. We don't have a group of stockholders that we report to on a quarterly and annual basis. And so this can be sort of those silent people that we're measuring ourselves up against, and just keeping the nose to the grindstone.
Right. And the interesting thing here is, whether you're a business owner, a department leader, or a individual contributor, you can take any KPI you want and do this very thing. And so the critical part here is, when you hear about continuous improvement, if you see that you're not hitting your KPI, and now we've identified that we've taken out the signals, right? So now we have a consistent, dependable system. And then somebody says, improve it. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, we're going to show you what to do, right? That's the next step. So a lot of times I'll look at it and say, well, we want to improve this by such and so. Until you understand that the system's in control, you've taken out those signals, and now you can say, now I can actually start planning that improvement. To someone just say, well, we just want to improve our customer sat by 10%, or inventory turns by 10%. That's all great. We're going to talk about, how do you actually get there? The critical part here is, you can continually improve just about anything with this methodology, right? And by using the control charts, you can see, are those changes you're making having substantive, or are they showing up in that number, either in the process metric or the outcome metric? So as you're starting to change the system, you're immediately starting to see, is that having an impact or not, good or bad? Because you can have a hypothesis that we're going to try and change this piece of it, and you may find that that's not a good idea, because you didn't think about some other outcomes that are showing up that are not good. And so you take a step back and say, okay, now let's restart. So the idea here is, there's a hypothesis if we make a certain change, that change will actually improve our either our process metric or outcome metric and get us closer to that goal. And that's the key thing, Brian, is making incremental improvements towards the goal. There's a book you and I have talked about before. I think it's called the Gap and the Gain.
Yeah.
The gap versus the gain. And everybody keeps looking at the gap and they're staring at that improvement versus are they looking at the actual gains that they're making as they move towards that goal, whatever that gap we set, whatever that target is. We just want to show that we're able to make incremental improvements towards that, sustain that for a while, and then if we want to, we can change it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the aspects that that you reminded me of when we were talking is the fact that it is okay. It's completely okay. And we have to, as small business owners, get used to this fact of having a theory, having an idea, and putting it into practice to be measured, and then be willing to get rid of it, to trash it. If it doesn't work or it is not up to your expectations, you do not have to keep it. Do not feel that there's no room, like we've talked before, there's no room for ego about marrying your ideas. You get rid of it and you move on to the next one. And so I think that's very important that we emphasize this fact, is the fact that we're not actually always 100% sure that what we're going to measure or what we're going to take action on is going to have a measurable impact. And that's okay. Like you've said so many times, hey, we're going to experiment with this and we're going to see. And if not, boom, done, get rid of it. It didn't have the impact we thought. Let's focus our attentions on something else. So I think that's a very, very good point that we have to keep in mind when doing this. Not everything that we initially think is going to be worth measuring or have the impact that we thought.
Right. So step 2, so we've identified the gap. Step 2 then is document the current process. And some places are lucky where they actually have either value stream maps, process maps, standard work, whatever those things are, that actually talk about how exactly is this work done. Now, whether they're up to date or not is questionable, because I've seen a lot of work being put into these and then they're sort of set aside. What we want to talk about is documenting this process and then making sure that it's always on a wall somewhere in a file ready to go, because we want that to be a living document. And this is something as simple as taking Post-it notes, and each Post-it note identifies a step that is being taken throughout that process. So you can think about retail, Brian. Can you think of a very simple process that you could document with Post-it notes on a whiteboard?
We got the hiring process. You've got the receiving process. You've got the daily opening process. You got a daily closing process. You have a call-in sick process. You have all of these. I love what you said, though. It has to be a living document. And just think about what it takes to sustain life.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
It's got to come to light. It's got to have light. It's got to have air. It's got to have some attention, emotional attention. If we're beings, we really, we feel dead inside when we're not getting any attention, right? It needs
feel like a mushroom.
Food and water. Yeah, exactly. We do not want our living document to become a piece of fungus, and just rot there. And so it's true. I mean, mushrooms are, they can serve their purpose, but you don't want to be on a steady diet of them.
Right,
so
right.
No, I like that, but it's very important that we do not overcomplicate it starting off. It is important that it just gets implemented and stays relevant, and then you can add to it a little bit more as habits are changed, especially if you're implementing this for the first time.
Exactly. Right.
You're gonna get some crazy pushback on this. The human factor is going to be like, oh, we know. We're just going to go roll the punches for a little bit, and then that'll be like anything else. And the KPI thing will fall to the wayside, and then we'll be able to go on with the simplest path of least resistance.
Right. So this is a great exercise to do with your team, to walk through it. And number one is it gets alignment on how do we do this today? And you're going to hear different potential versions of it. So tell the team that's okay. So let's document the way it should be 80% of the time, because there's always going to be exceptions, Brian. They're going to say, what about this? What about this? What about this? Like, that's great. We can write those down. But if we can document this to say 80% of the time or more, we can do it this way, step by step by step. Let's document that. Then here's the cool thing. In those steps, if there's a handoff, meaning that one person does step 1 through 3, then there's a handoff and goes to another person for step 4, 5, 6. You can draw a box around those process steps that are done by a single person. So now you're starting to see chunks of work being done by different people. Once that's done, you can estimate how much time it takes to do each step, and then how much time or delay is there between those steps. So when you do this in a typical business environment, good example. So I help manage call centers. And so it was critical to answer the phone within 10 seconds, right? Then there was what was called average handling time, right? So they were given so much time to actually handle the call. Then there was after call time. So once they hung up the phone, was there work that needed to be done to finish the orders? And this was a call center for customer orders. And then that order then went off to credit, or could have went directly to the warehouse. So we would track all that. So if you take that call center and say that's part of a value stream that gets an order from the customer calling in all the way to the warehouse, what we found is the individual actual process steps took very little time. I pick up the phone call. I've got less than a 3-minute average handling time. I've got a 1-minute wrap up. That's 4 minutes. Then it sits for 2 days before credit has a chance to review it. It takes them a minute to review that order and make sure the credit card's good, make sure that they have the credit limit they need, and then it sits again for 2 days before the warehouse prints it off. So everyone focuses on the person doing the work and saying we need to increase the number of calls we take. We need to increase or decrease the amount of time we spend on the phone with the customer. We need to pick, pack, and ship orders faster. But if you take a step back and say, how long is it taking me to fulfill that order? It literally 95+% of the time is spent sitting. Those orders are sitting somewhere and not being touched. So here's the cool part. We come to agreement as a team. This is about 80% of the time, this is how long it takes to do this. Excuse me, 80% of the time, this is the steps we take. Here's who does what. Here's how long it takes. And you take a step back and say, where would you want to make an improvement? How about if we start looking at removing the delay times in that system, which allows us to compress the lead time. So in this case, let's say we're trying to decrease the lead time from the time a customer places an order to the time we ship it out the door. And let's say today it's 3 days. We could say, could we take a day of that out of the system? Could we make improvements that allow us to take a full day out of that? And that seems crazy, right? It's like, oh my God, that's a third of the lead time. But if you look at it, the majority of the time, those orders are sitting. So the idea is map it, agree on the time frame, and then agree on where do you want to start making changes. So that map becomes the map of current state plus where we're going to start making improvements along that process.
Yeah. So I'm thinking in my mind of this document. So you have the documenting the whole process of it, and then you divide it into the boxes of different people who are in charge of different aspects of it. And it's kind of like when we want to have our process or our body evaluated, going to a doctor, we're like, he's not going to say, you know what, let's just do an x-ray on the entire body. Okay. And let's just do that. No, what does he do? He goes and he goes, okay, based on what you're saying here, we think there's something wrong with your right shoulder. Let's do an x-ray of that and really get in there and see what the issue is. So think of these boxes as different x-rays for the whole process that's going on. That's what that is. So we want to dig in and say, oh, wait, oh, it's right on the edge here, and then obviously, like you said too, it's not always about the process in each box. Sometimes it's the transition. It's that baton that's being passed on to the next box. That's where the inertia is lost. That's where the ROI is being lost. And it's like, oh, what do you do about that? Well, get the two teams together and be like, guys, what's happening here? So this is great. This is super good.
Yeah.
And this, again, everything that you're talking about here can be applied to small businesses. I don't care if you have a grooming business with 3 employees, or it doesn't matter, or you do pet sitting or whatever, or you got a plumbing business, or you got a little hot dog stand. It doesn't matter. These things can be measured. And once you get into these things, I'll tell you what, the engagement, and we've talked about it before, but employee engagement shoots through the roof because they realize, wow, I am part of a team that really cares, not just a paycheck. And it really does make a difference. So this is great.
Right. And the cool thing about the team, to your point on engagement, they're agreeing on how work gets done. They're agreeing on where the opportunities are to improve. So this isn't you coming in and saying, here's what you need to do to improve your area. It's, we need to look at improvement across the system. And I like that idea around the X-ray, or it could be like if you had a camera and you were, panning across the business. Although you're working on a single area of the business, you always want to think about, hey, if we do make this change, does it affect anything upstream from us or anything downstream from us? But a lot of these things that we're talking about here is just taking time out of the system so that you're seeing orders go to the warehouse faster. We're seeing orders get to customers, like credit faster, your accounting department. So it's having not only your group, but potentially other teams that are involved in that entire process in the mix. It will give you extremely high engagement. So then we pivot to, we can do 2 things. One, we want to identify where the areas of opportunity are. That could become sort of a de facto future state, meaning here's where I want to make those improvements. Or we can rethink, to your point, we can rethink that entire process. So let's say I am a dog groomer and I have an intake process. And today it takes forever. People get frustrated because they're on their way to work. They're at lunchtime or whatever. They're trying to get their pet in to have it groomed. And all they want to do is drop the dang thing off, but it takes 20 minutes to get checked in. And if you as a business owner can see that and say, where are those points of friction with the customer? And what if the customer could just walk in, drop off their dog, quickly identify, and boom, they walk out the door. So today it takes us 20 minutes to do that. Tomorrow we want it to have it like in 3 minutes, we can do that. That's your future state. So you want to be able to map that out. Now you've got a gap. So remember, we created the gap for the KPI. Now within the process, we're saying we're going to create a gap of where we're going to make those improvements. So we want to take our waiting time from 20 minutes to say 5 minutes or 10 minutes, take half the time out. So you're creating a gap there. And then we start, to your point earlier, we have a hypothesis. If we did it this way going forward, we can take a significant amount of time out. It's easier for us internally and it's easier for the customer. Let's try this for a day. Let's try this for a week, whatever that case may be. A day, if you have a lot of turnover, right, with a lot of pets coming in, if you're a pet groomer, you can get a lot of repetitions and figure out if that change works. If you have a smaller shop, it may take you a full week to get an idea, is this change making a difference? Here's the other cool thing. If it's customer facing, you're going to know immediately, right? Is this having an impact or not? Because they're going to be smiling, or they're going to say, or you can say, hey, bear with us. We're trying to make some quick changes. And what we want to be able to do is make it much easier for you to check your dog in. Can we spend an extra minute here and ask you a couple of questions and engage the customer in that change also?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking back to a landscaping company that I worked with a while back. And the fact was, they determined after a while was the fact that they could not afford to take on certain clients, no matter how big they were, because they were out of their range. And it was more important to cut the travel time down and the load time down. So every time you load, you don't think about it, you're like, oh, we need more lawns to mow or what have you, or, places to trim and that type of thing. But they were forgetting about the transition time, load, unload, transport all the workers, get there, unload, go at it, load back up, go to so it was paying for them to have smaller accounts closer to each other, and then they could offer greater discounts to anybody else that was in that area, and therefore just maximize their efficiency and really increase their ROI tremendously. And you find that out kind of just being like, man, where's the stress points here? Well, I'm spending this much time doing this. So yeah, you're right on the bat. I mean, you can do that perfectly also with talking to customers. Yeah.
Then the nice thing is, again, we talk about that tension triangle between the customer, your coworkers, your employees, and the company. And it's amazing when you make these changes. Some of them impact all three of them. Right? Your customers are happier, your employees are happier, and you as an owner are going, "This is crazy good stuff." Right?
Yeah,
and
most of the
man,
time
if you
it
can do
does
that,
too, to a greater or lesser extent. It absolutely, especially when you're talking about smaller companies that all the parts talk, and there are no just single business units that are operating 100% on their own. So the majority of small business owners and businesses are going to have this where it is impacting every aspect to one extent or another. And we have to be ready for that, but not scared off by that either, but excited by the fact that, wow, this impact can have an impact over here on employee engagement, on strategic planning, on our revenue stream and our processes. And so it can be an exciting thing.
So the fourth step now then is essentially documenting the plan. And you started with accountability. This is the part we sit down and say, okay, our focus is on this particular KPI. We've created a gap, or there is a gap, and we want to get to this level with this KPI. We've identified this part, this process that we're going to improve. So over the next 2 weeks, or whatever time frame you decide, what steps are we going to take? Who's going to take them? When are they going to take them? And when do we expect to have a report out, so that we have a method to executing the changes we want to make, and then allows us time to look at those KPIs and say, are we actually making an improvement that we expected to see or not? In many cases, early on, you may want to check in, within the day, intra-day, but then over time, it can be just right away in the morning. How did it go? Unless there's a blow up, how did it go? What obstacles did we have to overcome? Should we continue to go down this path? Right, to your point, we may find that something went wrong. All right, let's take a pause. Let's take a step back and figure out what to do. It's not we're not going to make improvements, and it's not that we're not going to move forward with this, but something happened yesterday. We should talk about it. Are we okay moving forward, or should we make a pivot? 90% of the time, we're going to continue to move forward. But if you have a week or a 2 week sort of sprint where you're doing this experiment and you're monitoring how it's going, your team may find out that very quickly, wow, we can make that change. We've already made the improvement. Let's close that change out. We're going to continue to monitor the KPI. Let's move on to the next improvement. Or it's taking a little longer than we thought. Fine, right? We still want to stay on this path because we know that it's a good improvement. It's just going to take a little bit longer than we thought to get it in place.
Right. And one of the things I would say when implementing this process of improvement, don't go too big. Do not go too big with it. Way too often, us small business owners get way too excited. We've drank the Kool-Aid. We are just chomping at the bit to change everything, because now we're seeing that everything maybe not necessarily should be changed, but can be changed. And sometimes we're overzealous in this fact. So I would say just stick to 3 to 5 KPIs for right now. Just limit yourself. I'd say that just to give a number, it could be 3 to 5 per business unit or per division or whatever, but really try to simplify it down as much as possible, and then work on that process of improvement, which you will be able probably to just, kind of carbon copy on over. And for
Yes.
carbon copy, for those people who aren't in the paper we have to explain what carbon copy is.
The old
People think it's
mimeograph
just,
machine.
yeah. People thinking, wait, oh, I'm CCing in an email. That's what that means, But it was actually when you wrote down on the original piece of paper, and then there was a piece of carbon in between, then another piece of paper that was copied on over. That's how we were able to, before all computers, to have our filing system. One went to the customer, one went to the back room, and the other went to invoicing,
Yeah,
so.
white copy, yellow copy, pink
And
copy.
pink copy, yeah.
And then remember the smell it released when you actually pushed down on that? There was
Oh
some sort of like,
yeah, hysterical. So we got a few more minutes. I'll let you. Do you want to summarize it up here for us?
right. So this is the third in our KPI trilogy. This really wraps up. What do you do with this, right? Instead of staring at the KPIs, they become part of the woodwork, or what do they call it? Admiring the problem, right? We want to make those KPIs radiate information to us. So coming into that, I said we need to identify a gap, either an existing gap, or we're going to create a gap. We're going to document our process. And again, go online. You can look up process mapping, flow charts, value streams, however you want to do that. But almost every method really talks about just using basic Post-it notes on a whiteboard, having your team stand at the board and document how you do things today. Then it's identifying where are the areas of opportunity. We put on there the blocks. The Post-it notes represent a process step. We know how long it takes to do that step. In between, we've identified what the delay is between those steps. We've identified what steps are being done by each individual person, put a box around there. And then based on that, we're saying, hey, let's say we want to reduce lead time. Let's focus on this area of the map or the process map and say, what could we do to help reduce the amount of time that order sits? We build a plan to do it. That becomes sort of your future state map, or you could recreate your process entirely. But typically you just see it to start is current state map with improvements identified on there. That's your future state map for now. And then make sure you document simple on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet, who, what, why, where, when, right? So who's going to do what? Why are they doing it? When are they going to do that? When do we expect to see the results, right? And then what do we expect to see happen with that KPI? And if those things continue, then at some point we close that out and say, yep, we're going to sustain that going forward. That becomes part of the new process. Then we look at another area to go after. So when we say continuous improvement, we mean it, right? We are going to continue to move towards that goal we set.